So I want to move on to the European side because, of course, what you're doing is enforcement. Europe has started earlier with enforcement and then embarked in an extraordinary democratic project, I think, of attempting to regulate as well as enforce. So Stephanie Yon-Courtin is one of the main architects of the regulatory effort in the European Parliament. She was very much in the Econ committee that drove the legislation, the DMA, DSA, through at record speed. And we find ourselves now in Europe with legislation which is actually enforced. I mean, we're talking in a moment with those who are actually at the coal face enforcing it. But Stephanie, tell us a bit about the thinking and where do you think this is going? Do you think it has the prospect to achieve what you thought it could achieve?
Yes and no. Well, thanks, Christina, for organizing this very impressive conference on antitrust, very hot topics without caffeine. I think thanks to Christina, we don't need caffeine. So, well, with this room full of experts, I'm not going to explain in detail the DSA and DMA, but anyway, that we passed at the European level. But however, I cannot prevent myself from saying a few words, as these two texts are really landmark legislations for the regulation of the online environment. So why addressing these two texts, DSA, DMA, Digital Services Act, Digital Markets Act, together? I mean, the topic is quite broad, as you've just mentioned. At the same time, the answer is quite straightforward. On the one hand, we do need to regulate big techs, giants, for their unfair practices that fail to be properly addressed under existing EU competition law. That's a real failure. And on the other hand, we have to ensure a safe, transparent, and trustworthy environment for consumers and discourage traders who abuse platforms from selling unsafe or counterfeit goods. These are, you know, the two, let's say, the two sides of the same coin. Now, with the DSA and DMA, the EU is setting its own rules of the game. And with the DMA, EU is now saying to the big tech what they can do, what they cannot do, and not the other way around. And for years, we experience big tech deciding on who can enter the market or not, what choices consumers could have, or imposing their own rules, their own terms and conditions, and with no room for negotiation whatsoever. So breaking news today, it's over, or at least on the paper, because we will need to hear the enforcers speaking now. But at least we've got a very nice paper on that. With the DSA, we are also now saying to Twitter, to Facebook, to open up their algorithm. And we oblige them to have the necessary means to ensure online moderation that will lead to a safer online environment. And you know, while Elon Musk is now buying Twitter and wants to return to unlimited free speech and firing moderators at the same time, he has to know that he will not be able to do that in the European Union. And we'll have to respect our rules. Otherwise, he will have to do without a market of more than 560 million consumers. Don't count your chickens before they hatches. Big techs are now looking for fresh money to cope with the increased need for online moderation, and we have to be careful that, you know, with what they are doing now, they do not create new solutions, you know, with the Twitter Blue or the Meta Verified, these new tools that could create, again, their own new standards, new ecosystems, and their proper rules at the same time. So finally, the results are at stake are very high. We are talking about, you know, tons of companies that had and still have to shut down their business because of years of unfair practices from big tech. We're also talking of millions of consumers who are still injured by unsafe products online. But also citizens who are victims of disinformation or harmful content online. This is exactly the purpose of our role as co-legislators, as in the European Parliament, to say stop. And I have to say that the legislators, and as I said, with all this legislation we have on paper are great, not only because I contributed to it, but the proof of the pudding is in the eating. If we want to walk, the implementation leg is crucial. Now we've got one leg, the adoption. And talking concretely about implementation, let's be honest. Turning now to the Commission. For all the bold measures, obligations and interdictions that we are now imposing to big tech, such as Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, and all the gatekeepers, the European Commission will have a bunch of less than 100 of people working on it. Less than 100 people. Compared to the army of lawyers that all big techs have. We are working to assist to a remake, the new version of David versus Goliath, with new characters, being the European Commission on the one side and versus big tech on the other. Goliath was an enemy warrior. He was fierce, like people in Texas, I think, and bigger than anyone else. David was a young shepherd, refusing the king's offer of the royal armor. He kills Goliath with his sling. Let's hope the same destiny to our 80 warriors at the European Commission, but don't get too excited. It will only begin in 2024. So we are still in the teaser moment. Thanks, Christina, for making it cheesy. But don't get me wrong, if you don't want to, and we don't want to get rid of big tech, they brought still a lot of benefits to consumers, innovation, and so on. And I just think we need to ensure the famous Brussels level playing field, you know, to make sure that companies compete on the merits and not on unfair practices. To me, that is the essence of competition we all share. This is why it's so important that antitrust must continue to work in parallel. And the question of this articulation is key. And I'm still waiting to see how it will interplay, and there might be some overlaps when it comes to DMA, also DSA, which is a horizontal regulation. But how will it work with influencers, with the fight against online child pornography? Many challenges lie ahead of us, but definitely the EU is paving the way to other jurisdictions. This is breaking news as well, you know. As the US, we know China, South Korea are working on it. So we now have to deliver, no choice, with concrete results for citizens and company. In a few years, let's say 3-4 years ago, we started from scratch. It was the Far West, as Thierry Breton called it. To now, plenty of text that regulate the digital environment, DSA, DMA, Data Act, Data Governance Act, Artificial Intelligence Act. It would be quite a challenge to ensure a great interplay. And maybe now it's a big call for desilozation of the work at the European Commission. Big challenge. Europe is, of course, a global trendsetter. Let's say a worldwide best influencer, and I think it would be and do great in TikTok. Also, maybe not anymore, as EU officials, and now the European Parliament is the same, are forbidden to use it. So better do some Instagram Reels now. As we did with the regulation on the protection of personal data, Europe is, I think, creating standards, really, that will definitely serve as examples to the whole world. We do it today on digital, but also on environmental, social. We are, I think, an example for many countries in the world, and let's just take the artificial intelligence. The digital revolution has triggered a global tech race, and the EU is currently falling behind, with only 8 of the world's top 200 digital companies located in the Union. If the EU fails to set standards for human-centered artificial intelligence based on our ethical, based on our democratic values, they will be decided elsewhere. Besides all our work on the others, we also have to work on ourselves. It's not only about regulating or unbundling big tech. We also have to give us the means to achieve all the global objectives, such as the strategic autonomy and the resilience of our internal market. So ex-ante regulation, finally, is just one piece of the European strategic cake. Our regulatory, I think, framework must be clear and predictable. It's not only about funding, but it's about creating the right opportunities. It's clear that we missed a lot. We missed the wave of personal data. We could make the most of industrial and open data, I think. ChatGPT should have been European. And I think we should better see the potential in using public procurement to increase resilience. Smart procurement already helps to achieve the key priorities related to the twin transition, green and digital, innovation and social objectives across many industrial ecosystems, and by, I think, creating demand and supporting strategic sectors, public procurement definitely helps to reduce dependencies and strengthen the resilience of industrial ecosystems. So it's time for the EU to become truly aware of the need to ensure a fair share of European public purchases, which is made for innovative European companies. And to conclude, Christina, to conclude, because I see
you can see my killer looks. Yes.
To conclude, well, the EU has not rested on its laurels, as you can see, for the past years. It has achieved a lot in terms of digital regulation and competition, DSA, DMA, new foreign subsidy tool, upcoming new relevant market definitions, and so on. Let's now ensure that expertise, resources, experience with both the Commission and national competition authorities and national authorities will be enough to deal with all of it. Most of all, well, let's not forget why we have all these tools, and don't be shy to pursue some objectives. And for the competition purist, I used to be one as a lawyer, but please shut your ears, as I'm going to say something very difficult for you to hear. That industrial policy and competition policy can go and must go hand in hand if we want to succeed in the future, while still sticking to our values and principles of our fair market economy. Thank you.
Thank you.